Robert De Niro, a name that conjures images of unparalleled intensity, of characters so deeply inhabited they've become part of our cultural bloodstream. The taxi driver with a mohawk staring into the mirror, the aging boxer whose fists once commanded respect, the patriarch of a mafia family whose quiet power could silence a room. For over 5 decades, he has given us performances that transcend entertainment and enter the realm of cultural touchstones. His ability to disappear into roles has made him not just one of our greatest living actors, but a North Star by which an entire generation of performers has navigated their craft. Before we begin, don't forget to hit like as a gesture of tribute to this extraordinary talent who has shaped cinema as we know it. Yet beneath the accolades and the reverence lies a story of profound personal cost. The very intensity that made him legendary on screen has exacted a toll in the shadows, away from the cameras. Today, at 77, Robert De Niro stands at a crossroads that few could have predicted for the man once considered indestructible. His legendary resilience now faces perhaps its greatest test. At 77, De Niro's gaze still carries the weight of someone who has seen more of life than most could imagine. The eyes that once terrified us as Travis Bickle now reflect a different kind of battle. One fought not on a film set, but in the quiet corridors of real life. Recent years have brought losses that would buckle even the strongest among us, financial struggles that seem incongruous with his stature, and health challenges that remind us of his mortality. The man who once transformed his body with frightening dedication for Raging Bull now navigates the fragility that comes with age. What happens when a titan of culture, someone whose work has defined American cinema for half a century, faces the ultimate opponent, time itself? And how does one reconcile the gap between public immortality and private vulnerability? His story begins far from the Hollywood Hills, in a modest apartment in Manhattan's Greenwich Village. Born in 1943 to 2 artists, his father, Robert De Niro Sr., a respected abstract expressionist painter, and his mother, Virginia Admiral, a painter and poet, young Robert was immersed in creativity from his first breath. The small apartment often smelled of oil paints and turpentine, the walls adorned with his father's bold, colorful canvases. But the artistic household fractured early. His parents separated when he was just 2 years old, his father moving out after acknowledging his homosexuality, a profoundly difficult decision in the America of the 1940s. The young De Niro was primarily raised by his mother in Little Italy, surrounded by the rhythms and cadences of a neighborhood that would later inform some of his most iconic roles. Virginia supported them by working as a typist and copy editor, her discipline and work ethic silently seeping into her son's developing character. Their small apartment became a sanctuary of sorts, but also a launching pad. On the streets below, young Robert absorbed the characters and conflicts of urban life, developing what would become his remarkable powers of observation. At school, he was nicknamed Bobby Milk for his pale complexion, an early outsider status that seemed to both wound and strengthen him. By 10 years old, he had already made his stage debut as the Cowardly Lion in a school production of The Wizard of Oz, an ironic role for a boy who would one day become synonymous with fearlessness on screen. The shy child found in acting a voice he couldn't locate in the hallways and playgrounds where he often felt invisible. His mother's apartment featured a small television where young Robert would study the performances of Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift, rewinding and replaying scenes until he could mimic every inflection, every gesture. What others saw as entertainment, he approached as apprenticeship. While his father's absence created a palpable void, it also instilled in him a determination to forge his own path. The neighborhood became his classroom, the streets his education. By 16, with his mother's reluctant blessing, he dropped out of school to pursue acting full-time, a decision that must have seemed like madness to everyone except the quiet teenager who had already begun to burn with uncommon purpose. Those early years of struggle remain somewhat shrouded, deliberately kept private by a man who has always understood the power of mystery. What we do know is that De Niro's path to recognition was neither quick nor easy. While contemporaries found faster routes to success, he worked in near obscurity, taking odd jobs between auditions and small roles. He waited tables, moved furniture, and reportedly even worked as a shoe salesman, storing away observations of human behavior that would later emerge in characters so authentic they seemed pulled directly from life rather than imagination. The acting classes at the Stella Adler Conservatory and Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio shaped his raw talent into disciplined craft. Adler reportedly once told him, Your talent is in your choice of roles, advice that would prove prophetic. Yet for every audition he attended, rejection followed with brutal consistency. Casting directors found him too intense, too ethnic, too unusual. In an industry that often prizes conventional attractiveness, De Niro's distinctive features and burning intensity made him invisible in a world obsessed with spotlights. Small theater productions, uncredited film appearances, and blink-and-you'll-miss-it television spots. The resume of the future legend read like that of countless New York actors destined for perpetual anonymity. One early film, The Wedding Party, sat unreleased for years. Another, Greetings, barely registered with audiences. The young actor lived in Spartan apartments, sometimes without heat, his dedication to his craft unwavering despite the seeming indifference of the industry. Friends from those years recall his monk-like focus, how he would practice dialects while riding the subway, how he would spend hours observing people in diners and on street corners, building a library of human behavior from which he would later draw. What separated De Niro from countless other struggling actors was not just talent, but an almost pathological persistence. Rejection, rather than deterring him, seemed to fuel a deeper resolve. Each no hardened his determination, as if the industry's resistance only confirmed his belief that he had something valuable, something different to offer. This was not the path of someone seeking fame for its own reward, but of an artist who couldn't imagine any other life than one devoted to his craft. And that's when everything changed. The pivotal moment arrived in the form of a small role in a film called Bang the Drum Slowly in 1973, where De Niro played a baseball player suffering from a terminal illness. His performance, stripped of mannerism and filled with quiet dignity, caught the attention of critics who suddenly took notice of the actor who had been working in the shadows for years. But it was his reunion with a young director named Martin Scorsese that would truly alter the trajectory of his career and, indeed, American cinema itself. Their collaboration on Mean Streets in 1973 introduced audiences to an actor of frightening authenticity. As Johnny Boy, the self-destructive small-time hood, De Niro brought to the screen a volatile unpredictability that felt dangerous in ways that scripted drama rarely achieved. The scene where he enters a bar to the Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash, moving with coiled energy and anarchic glee, announced the arrival of a singular talent. Scorsese had found his on-screen alter ego, and De Niro had found the director who understood how to harness his unique intensity. What followed was a creative explosion almost unparalleled in American acting. Francis Ford Coppola cast him as the young Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part II in 1974, a role that required him to step into the shoes of Marlon Brando, the very actor he had studied so carefully as a boy. Speaking primarily in Sicilian dialect, De Niro didn't merely imitate Brando's performance. He excavated the character's younger self with such precision and emotional truth that he won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. In the span of 2 years, he had gone from virtual unknown to being anointed by Hollywood as the heir to its greatest acting tradition. The summit of his early career, and perhaps of modern screen acting itself, came with Taxi Driver in 1976. His portrayal of Travis Bickle, the alienated Vietnam veteran driving his cab through the nighttime streets of a decaying New York, has become so embedded in our cultural consciousness that it's difficult to separate the performance from its impact. The famous "You Talkin' to Me" scene, largely improvised by De Niro in front of a mirror in a lonely apartment, has been referenced and parodied countless times, yet nothing diminishes its original power. The physical transformation, the mohawk, the military posture, the lean, coiled physique, was impressive, but it was the portrayal of urban alienation and psychic disintegration that announced a new kind of screen acting. What audiences didn't see was the grueling preparation. De Niro actually obtained a taxi license and drove cabs around New York for weeks before filming, picking up real passengers. He lived in a similar apartment to Travis's, wore the character's clothes around the city, and immersed himself in the psychological profile of a man teetering on the edge. This wasn't merely research, it was a total inhabitation that blurred the lines between actor and character in ways that would become De Niro's signature. The pinnacle of this transformative approach came with Raging Bull in 1980, widely regarded as one of the greatest performances in cinema history. As boxer Jake LaMotta, De Niro underwent a physical metamorphosis that remains astonishing even by today's standards. He trained with the real LaMotta until he was skilled enough to fight professionally, sculpting his body into that of a middleweight boxer. Then, when the narrative required Jake's decline into bloated retirement, De Niro shut down production and gained an unprecedented 60 pounds, completely altering his appearance and even his breathing patterns. The dedication won him his second Academy Award, this time for Best Actor. This golden period also saw remarkable performances in films like The Deer Hunter in 1978 and Once Upon a Time in America in 1984, establishing a body of work in a single decade that most actors couldn't achieve in a lifetime. His creative partnership with Scorsese continued to produce landmarks. King of Comedy in 1982, where his portrayal of delusional aspiring comedian Rupert Pupkin showed his ability to traverse the fine line between comedy and disturbance. Goodfellas in 1990, where his Jimmy Conway exuded menace through stillness rather than explosion. And Casino in 1995, completing a trio of definitive mob-related performances. But here's where it gets complicated. The very method that produced these towering achievements exacted a personal cost that remained largely hidden from public view. The immersive approach to character, what Stanislavski called living the part, meant that De Niro repeatedly subjected himself to psychological states that would disturb most people's equilibrium. Living for months as Travis Bickle or Jake LaMotta required dwelling in damaged mindsets, inviting characters' demons to take temporary residence in his psyche. Colleagues from these productions have spoken of his isolation during filming, how he would remain partially in character even when cameras weren't rolling. The boundaries between self and role became permeable, raising questions about the psychological aftermath when these intense projects concluded. De Niro himself has rarely discussed this aspect of his process, maintaining the privacy that has been his hallmark. But one wonders about the toll of repeatedly dismantling and reconstructing one's identity for art's sake. His personal life during these years of professional triumph was marked by a similar intensity. His first marriage to actress Diane Abbott in 1976 produced a son, Raphael, and De Niro adopted Abbott's daughter from a previous relationship. The family lived in a loft in Tribeca, an area of Manhattan that De Niro would help transform through his business investments in later years. Yet, despite the trappings of domestic stability, the marriage ended in divorce in 1988, one casualty perhaps of a life devoted more to artistic creation than personal harmony. The private losses continued. His father, Robert De Niro Sr., passed away in 1993 from cancer. Though their relationship had been complicated by distance, both geographical and emotional, De Niro has spoken with moving candor about his father's influence and the regret that they weren't closer. He preserved his father's final studio exactly as it was left, a private shrine to a relationship that perhaps never fully blossomed in life. In the 2014 documentary, Remembering the Artist, Robert De Niro Sr., the normally reticent actor allowed a rare glimpse into his emotional life, reading from his father's journals and reflecting on the complexity of their bond. Professional disappointments also accumulated alongside the triumphs. Critics began to question his choices in the 1990s and 2000s, as the selective artist who once seemed to only commit to projects of substance began appearing in films that seemed unworthy of his gifts. For every Heat in 1995 or Casino in 1995, there seemed to be several paycheck roles that required little of the transformative dedication that had made him legendary. This apparent retreat from the uncompromising artistic standards of his earlier career became a narrative in itself. Was it financial necessity? A desire for wider commercial appeal? Or simply the natural evolution of an artist who had already pushed himself to extremes and now sought different challenges? De Niro himself has offered little explanation, maintaining the private nature that has always characterized his public persona. Now, if you're wondering why an actor of De Niro's caliber and presumed financial security would need to take roles in films widely regarded as beneath his talents, the answer appears to lie in a perfect storm of personal and financial complications. According to court documents made public during divorce proceedings with his second wife, Grace Hightower, De Niro's financial situation has been more precarious than his storied career might suggest. The divorce, finalized in 2018 after 2 decades of marriage, reportedly required him to pay substantial sums in settlement and ongoing support. Adding to these personal financial pressures, De Niro had invested heavily in his business ventures, most notably the Nobu restaurant chain and the Greenwich Hotel in Tribeca. While these investments have generally been successful, they also required substantial capital and ongoing financial commitment. The COVID-19 pandemic hit these hospitality ventures particularly hard, with his lawyer reportedly stating in court that the actor was working at an unsustainable pace to maintain his financial obligations. These glimpses into his financial reality paint a picture of a man caught between artistic legacy and practical necessity. The creative freedom that allowed him to be so selective early in his career appears to have narrowed with time and circumstance, creating a poignant contrast between the young actor who could afford to wait for the perfect role and the established star who reportedly must keep working to maintain the life he has built. Yet, to frame De Niro's later career solely in terms of artistic compromise would be a disservice to the moments of brilliance that have punctuated this period. His reunion with Scorsese for The Irishman in 2019 showed that the old magic remained intact, with his portrayal of hitman Frank Sheeran demonstrating that age had not diminished his ability to disappear into character. The film's use of de-aging technology allowed audiences to witness De Niro across decades of a character's life, a fitting technical innovation for an actor whose own career has spanned American filmmaking's modern era. Throughout his journey, relationships have provided both anchor and challenge. Though his marriages have ended in divorce, De Niro has maintained a commitment to family that belies his often remote public persona. He has 6 children, including twins born via surrogate when he was in his 50s, and has spoken with quiet pride about fatherhood. "I want my children to find their way," he once said, suggesting a desire for his children to forge identities separate from his overwhelming cultural shadow. His relationship with his father's memory has been particularly poignant. Beyond preserving the studio, De Niro has worked to ensure his father's artistic legacy, promoting exhibitions of his work and speaking about the injustice of his relative obscurity compared to contemporaries. This dedication to a parent who was often absent speaks to a depth of feeling that rarely surfaces in interviews but seems to inform much of his private motivation. Friendships, too, have provided continuity in a life marked by constant transformation. His 5-decade creative partnership with Martin Scorsese stands as one of the great director-actor collaborations in cinema history. Their shorthand on set is legendary. Sometimes entire scenes are communicated with minimal verbal direction, a testament to their shared artistic vocabulary. "Marty knows what I'm going to do before I do," De Niro once remarked, capturing the intuitive understanding that has produced some of both men's finest work. The present battle for Robert De Niro exists on multiple fronts. Physically, he has faced health challenges that come with age, though he maintains a remarkable vitality for a man in his late 70s. The injuries sustained over years of physical transformations for roles, particularly the boxing training for Raging Bull, have likely left their mark. Yet he continues to work at a pace that would exhaust many younger actors, suggesting a drive that remains undiminished by time. Emotionally, the loss of longtime friends and colleagues as he enters his 8th decade creates a landscape of absence that must be navigated. The deaths of fellow actors from his generation serve as reminders of mortality that cannot be ignored. How does an artist who has spent a lifetime inhabiting other lives reconcile with the finite nature of his own? The question hangs in the silence between his increasingly rare interviews. Artistically, the challenge is perhaps even more complex. How does one maintain creative vitality after having scaled the highest peaks of achievement decades earlier? The roles available to actors of his age are naturally more limited, and the physical transformations that were once his signature have become less feasible with time. Yet when given material worthy of his talents, as in The Irishman, he demonstrates that the essential alchemy of his craft, the ability to suggest complex interior lives through minimal external indicators, remains potent. Then there is the changing landscape of cinema itself. The theatrical experience that formed the foundation of his career has been increasingly challenged by streaming platforms and changing viewer habits, a shift accelerated by the global pandemic. What does it mean to be a titan of an art form that is itself in transformation? De Niro has adapted, working with Netflix on The Irishman, and embracing the opportunities offered by the new distribution models while still advocating for the irreplaceable nature of communal theatrical viewing. What remains constant through all these challenges is De Niro's commitment to the work itself. Despite having nothing left to prove, he approaches each role with the same preparation and focus that characterized his earliest performances. The drive appears to be internal rather than external, not a quest for further accolades or recognition, but the satisfaction of the craft itself. In this, perhaps, lies the key to understanding a career that has spanned such extremes of artistic achievement and commercial compromise. At the core remains an actor who simply needs to act, who finds in the temporary inhabitation of other lives a fulfillment that transcends fame or fortune. We have been privileged witnesses to one of the great artistic journeys in cinema history. From the struggling unknown in New York, acting, classes to the cultural icon whose methods redefined screen performance. Robert De Niro's path has illuminated the heights of what acting can achieve. The very intensity that has made his performances so memorable has also shaped a life of remarkable complexity, marked by stunning achievements and quiet struggles, public adoration and private reserve. At 77, he stands as both monument and still-evolving artist. The eyes that have registered so many emotions for the camera now carry the accumulated wisdom of a life lived at the intersection of art and mortality. The hands that once shaped characters through precise physical detail now move with the slight hesitation of age. Yet the essential mystery remains, the quality that has allowed him to be simultaneously one of our most recognized faces and one of our most private souls. Perhaps this is his greatest achievement, to have given so much of himself to his characters while maintaining the sanctuary of his true self. In an age of constant exposure and celebrity oversharing, De Niro reminds us of the power of reserve, of the spaces between words, of what remains unspoken. If his work has moved you, if Travis Bickle's alienation spoke to your own sense of disconnect, if Jake LaMotta's self-destruction illuminated something about human frailty, if young Vito Corleone's quiet determination resonated with your own ambitions, take a moment to leave a like on this video, not as celebration of a perfect life, but as acknowledgement of an imperfect one that has nonetheless created moments of perfect artistic truth. In the flickering light of the characters he has given us, we catch glimpses not just of Robert De Niro, but of ourselves, our darkest impulses and noblest aspirations, rendered with unflinching honesty and enduring power.